Hi, everyone. My name is Rabindra Hayashi, and I'm the Events Production Coordinator here at CAM. I am so happy to be here with you today. You just watched People Power, a shorts program with stories of communities coming together to stand for their values even when official structures have abandoned them. These villages, or from villages in Myanmar to burial grounds in Hawaii to San Francisco's SOMA neighborhood, these inspiring films remind us that it takes a village. We would like to acknowledge our wonderful co-presenters, which are organizations who serve and support diverse communities. For this program, we would like to thank Pacific Islanders and Communication and Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Center. Our first film is Pili Kamo'o, a film about a family in Oʻahu. The Fukumitsu ʻOhana of Hakipuʻu are native Hawaiian taro farmers and keepers of this generational practice. While much of Oʻahu has become urbanized, Hakipuʻu remains a key puka of traditional knowledge where great chiefs once resided and their bones still remain. The Fukumitsus are tossed into a world of complex real estate and judicial proceedings when nearby Kualoa Ranch, a large settler-owned corporation, destroys their familial burial grounds for continued development plans. Please welcome Justin Achong. Hi, Justin.
Aloha. Aloha. How are you guys?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for being here, especially like first thing in the morning for you.
All good. Yeah, thank you for having me. Grateful to be here.
So I wanted to start. Your documentary was really inspiring. It had a ton of really gorgeous footage in it too. But just like for you as the person who is making the documentary, I want to talk about your relationship to the story. How did you come to know the Fukumitsu Ohana?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So Kolea, who's the main I guess the head of the family, he and I built a relationship from a previous project that we had worked on. It was a narrative short called Hawaiian Soul, in which he played the protagonist. And that was his first time acting, but he was perfect for the role. And his main, I guess, work outside of that is taro farming and kind of taking care of his family and the land where he lives. And so we kind of got connected through that project. And while we were filming that project, one of the big landowners in that area, Kualoa Ranch, was sort of, I guess, digging on property that their family is buried at. And so they started dealing with all of these stresses. And um, at one point, as you saw in the film, Kolea got arrested for kind of standing and protecting their place. And when that had happened, that was sort of blasted live on social media, and this call was put out to come out. And um, I was one of the people that responded and showed up the next morning. And luckily, I had a camera on me that morning, and that kind of started the journey in filming their struggle that's been ongoing with Kualoa Ranch and trying to protect their familial burials. And so, yeah, I thought it was just a story that needed to be shared and told, and wanted to use my skill set to help do that. And then Nia Taro and Upstander Project created the Reciprocity Project, where they reached out to a handful of different indigenous filmmakers throughout the world to kind of explore the idea or the theme of reciprocity within our own community. And since I was already doing some filming just on my own to sort of help the family, I thought using their story for the reciprocity project might be a great way to help get their story out on a bigger platform.
That's really interesting. And so just to be clear, so even though that standoff with the police comes in the middle of the film, that's actually when the project really started.
Yeah, exactly. That was the first thing I shot. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. And that kind of explains too. I remember watching it. I was like, oh, the aspect ratio on this is completely
Yeah.
different. Like this looks
Yeah.
like this was shot on a phone.
Yeah. So all of that stuff was all pulled from a phone. Whoever was there, had their phones. The family had their phones. We pulled stuff from the live stream on Instagram, and then yeah, the next day I brought my camera. So I wasn't even on there on the day of the arrest, but grateful that there was some footage of it.
Yeah, I mean that's such a wonderful thing about the world that we live in today. Is like when there's these big things that happen, there's always footage of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then, so speaking of that, though, speaking of like footage and like your decision to use certain kinds of footage, one thing I really also loved about this film is the way that you're highlighting a lot of aspects of Hawaiian cultural life that frequently get overshadowed as just like decorative in Hawaiian tourist materials. And that goes from everything to like the offerings to ancestral graves, to the labor that goes into farming taro, or even using the Hawaiian language to describe the
Yeah.
relations both to land and to law, and being really strongly making sure that other people are using those terms as well. So
Mhm.
can you say a little bit more about which aspects you decided to highlight and why?
Yeah, I mean, once the project sort of became centered around the reciprocity project, exploring this idea that reciprocity is a worldview that's kind of inherent in a lot of indigenous cultures throughout the world, in that there's relationship, right, with everything between people, relationship between people and land, between objects, between the seen and the unseen, and everything is this exchange of energy, right, and which kind of
Hmm.
goes against the mainstream capitalism narrative that's very much take, exploit at whatever cost, exponential growth, right, and that's
Hmm.
we were learning that that's not a sustainable worldview, and so really centering their story and their struggle in that theme, I think, was important for me. And their story isn't the only one in Hawaii where there are families and communities dealing with their ancestral burials being unearthed and mistreated due to continued progress and development in our islands, where capitalism and the building of to serve the tourism industry really, a lot of times takes precedence over maintaining these cultural practices and these cultural connections. And so, yeah, for me, it was important just to highlight the fact that we are still here. We do still care for um, and view those our family that are have gone on and that are buried. We still, a lot of us still maintain connections with them, and that there's a reciprocal relationship that happens between the living and our family that has gone on, and that there's continued fight, and that this is just one story out of many.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, in that you're really highlighting the ways that this struggle fits into, really centuries of ongoing encroachment from settler colonial powers on in the islands of Hawaii. Um, and so I would love to talk about. There's so many things to talk about in this film, but unfortunately, we are getting close to time. One question I wanted to ask, or I had a few questions that I wanted to make sure we absolutely get though. For people who are really attached to the story after seeing it, audiences who really want to take something away or really want to do something to contribute to this film, or contribute to these people, what can they do to help?
Yeah, you can basically follow the family and their story online. I think their website is protecthakipu'u.org. I can write it in the chat. Um, and that has kind of a lot more information, like the timeline of the generational struggle that they've gone through, like where they're at, ways to help, things like that. So yeah, please go check them out and give them a follow. Continue to talk about and share PILI Kamo'o and the rest of the reciprocity project stories, if you enjoyed it. Yeah, and continue to support our work, indigenous work.
Awesome. And for people who love the story but also really like your work, how can they follow you?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram. My handle is at Jaya Chong, at Ja Chong, and then you can also follow the Reciprocity Project to see when each of those 7 films are screening. We're currently doing our film festival run, and each of the films are getting into different festivals, and so it's really exciting. The community that's being built around this project.
That's so wonderful to hear, and I hope that other audiences are able to connect with it, and I hope that it helps bring more visibility as well as just more action to protecting places like Hakipu'u. Justin, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, our next film is a wonderful local film called "It Takes the Hood to Save the Hood." The hardship brought upon by COVID-19 harshly impacts San Francisco south of Market. So the local heroes of a mutual aid organization work against crises and chaos to uplift their community. This film is also part of our SOMA Filipinas Filipino Cultural Heritage District highlight. Please welcome Harvey Lozada. Hi, Harvey.
You doing?
Thanks for being here. So I just wanted to start. So I love this film for so many reasons. In addition to the fact that like I'm a native from San Francisco, and I've been to SOMA so many times. There are even a few people that I even recognize in the film, as well as organizations that I recognize in the film. But because of that, there's a lot of it that's like almost ordinary to me. And like as we're in like our daily lives, I want to know, while this film does take place in reaction to COVID-19, and talks a lot about the different community organizations shifting their needs. Was there a distinct point where you remember you're like, I got to start filming, I got to start recording this?
Yeah, I mean, so this happened. This was in real time, right? So this was happening during the pandemic, and it was during a time where they didn't recommend you to go out. And I
Hmm.
was living like vicariously through social media, and I knew how the story had to be told. And once I got permission to be out there, because they only really wanted limited folks out there, folks who were actually passing out food and stuff. And I just asked Rudy, I said, may I come out there with a camera, because this is a part of our history. We don't know, how it's going to go down. And so yeah, I thought it was important to go out there and really document like this history that this living history at the time that we had been living in.
Yeah, and I think that really comes out too. I mean, it's very clear that you're doing it in the middle of it, and there is that moment in the documentary where everyone's like, "I thought this was going to be 3 weeks," and then it's here we are, 2022, doing this Q&A. And so something about this being seen as such an important part of this, having this history out there, and having people in SOMA be rendered visible, because there are a lot of ways that SOMA sort of gets rendered invisible when we talk, like the actual people in SOMA get rendered invisible when, politicians or people talk about the area. Can you tell us more about the importance of highlighting a story about a community organization in SOMA in particular?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. You said it right, right? Soma is definitely a forgotten place. It's a place where like folks kind of come and go and do what they do in that area, and it's because of a lot of reasons, right? It's plagued with the area where substance abuse is high, homelessness
Mhm.
is high, or I should say, our houseless residents are high in there, and yeah, it, it's tragic that like that things like that are overlooked. You know what I mean? They kind of like turn look the other way, but given the opportunity and the privilege to be able to document this and really tell the truth was really important to me. Being able to really show like what was really going down on the ground. Like as one of the people said, Boogie, 10 toes to the floor.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. And being able, and I think that it's great to see people like, as you mentioned, like it's often just associated or talked about as though it is like, I don't want to say like a problem, but like I feel like there's so much of San Francisco politics that's ready to just like pretend that's not there. That whole district is there when there's all these wonderful people who are living there. And one of the things that's really wonderful about the film in particular is to see the diverse group of people decide to come together for their communities. And that's people of all different ages, people of all different backgrounds, people of all different occupations. And so as you were making this film, how did you see the relationships between people in the area transform, especially as they were doing work through United Players?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you hit it right, right? It's a true representation of what San Francisco is, right? It's super diverse.
Mhm.
There's a lot of history there. Families do in fact live there, and they've lived there for generations, right? And so it's really like a folks from all different cultural backgrounds, and what brought them together was really like taking ownership over the neighborhood, taking care of the hood.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a beautiful thing to see and witness, to be honest.
Yeah, I was really quite moved by it too. People are talking about all the past roles, but even the communities, like as organizations, like Bindlestiff didn't do anything, or Bindlestiff is it's a theater, so seeing it completely like shift into doing this sort of help through United Players is really quite moving to see. And so one thing that I also wanted to ask too then is for audiences who, especially audiences who live in areas like Soba, how would you hope that people might be changed after watching your film?
I mean, what I hope, and this is kind of like aging myself, but I remember growing up in the city, and folks actually knew who their neighbors were, right? Folks actually interacted. They knew who was at the corner store. They knew people in the neighborhood. And I feel like I hope that this film helps build community, because during this time, all we had was ourselves, you know what I mean? And folks stepped up to risk their lives for other people. And so I hope that, like we can remember like the time that we were living in and how hard that was, and how just how important it is to unite and and to respect one another, because we're living in a tough time right now.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. One thing I was also curious about too is like obviously when you're making it, it's all very overwhelming because so much is happening, everything is new at once, and yet you do have this sort of thread line of like going back to a time, ways that all this newness promotes this sort of more old-fashioned neighborliness. Um, and so I wanted to know when you were like going back and making the film and like reviewing your footage, did anything come out that surprised you as you were doing it?
I would say one of the biggest things was that like nobody mentioned anything about um like folks were thinking about the present, you know what I mean? Like people were talking about like what needs to happen now. And I truly like really valued that and respected that. Like, folks were scared, but they put that behind them. You know what I mean? They're just like, this is something that I have to do. And I feel like that was the biggest thing. I mean, it gives me goosebumps, right? Talking about it, because it was like we all during that time, any one of us could have passed away.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. Like when you put it that way, like there was this moment of everyone was just there at that moment, just there for each other. Um, so another question that I had then is for people, what is like United Players doing nowadays? Are they still working within SOMA? Sort of work is happening with them nowadays?
Yeah, so from right now, from what I know, so United Players, they're still doing their violence prevention work. One of the biggest things right now is they're really the forefront for anti-violence in the city. And so
Mhm.
there's been the city's been hot. You know what I mean? There's been a lot of
Yeah.
I should say street violence that's been occurring, and they really are holding it down, holding vigils for families, and really trying to stop the violence. They hold gun buybacks, and so stay tuned on ways that you can support them, because they're really on the front line out there.
Yeah. Are there ways that our audience might be able to support them, especially local audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, United Players, you can reach out to Kuya Rudy, or, Big Brother Rudy. He's on social media. You can reach out to United Players themselves. They're on Howard Street, right in the heart of SOMA, 6 and Howard to be exact. But I also feel like, they all, what's really cool about them is they all linked up, just like you mentioned, right? Like West Bay came out, Bindle Stiff came out, and the Filipino Resource Center, amongst other folks. But those are the main people that I highlighted in the film that all came out together to really make this possible for folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for people who are interested in learning more about your work, as you do more work, and I hope you do more work, especially about SOMA and about San Francisco, how can people follow you?
Please follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is YSF, WHYSF. And then my website is ysf.org.
All right. Make sure that you follow Harvey. And Harvey, again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it. Once again, you've been watching People Power at CamFest 40. This is a series of films that feature people coming together when government organizations are not necessarily supporting them in their times of need. And I really appreciate having both of these filmmakers here with us today. And so before we close out today, I'd like to bring both Justin Ah-Chong and Harvey Lozada back on. So just want to say again, thank you for taking part in CamFest 40 to both of you.
Thanks for having me.
For everyone else, CamFest 40 runs from May 12th to the 22nd, and so do be sure to check out our other programming. In the meantime, take care, enjoy the festival, and take care of one another. Bye for now.